Have you ever found yourself, suddenly needing to vacuum the entire house? Or maybe you decided to meticulously reorganize your spice rack alphabetically, and all just to avoid opening one mildly complicated spreadsheet? Well, hello and welcome. I'm absolutely thrilled you're here for this explainer, because today we are going to completely reframe something pretty much all of us struggle with: getting started on difficult tasks. If you've ever felt stuck, this is definitely for you. We're going to break down the actual anatomy of action, dig into the hidden wiring of our brains, and learn exactly how to overcome emotional procrastination. So, why can't we just start? I mean, we've all lived through this exact agonizing experience, haven't we? You're sitting there at your desk just staring down this daunting to-do list or maybe a completely blank document. The cursor just blinking at you, practically mocking you at this point. You let out a heavy sigh. The clock is ticking loudly in the background, the deadline is rapidly approaching, and yet, you're doing absolutely nothing. You feel this intense frustration building up in your chest, that really heavy guilt weighing you down, and you sit there wondering why that very first step, just typing a single sentence or making one quick phone call, is so incredibly hard to take. Okay, let's dive into this, because understanding this next point is going to lift a massive weight off your shoulders. We've been culturally conditioned by a society that constantly praises hustle culture, grinding all day, and relentless productivity. Because of that, we've bought into a really pervasive, damaging myth that procrastination just equals laziness. When we freeze up, we harshly judge ourselves. We tell ourselves we just lack discipline or willpower. But the reality, as behavioral research clearly shows us, is an entirely different paradigm. Procrastination is actually a response to emotional distress. Let that sink in for a second. You aren't lazy. You are experiencing a profound emotional roadblock. Your brain is literally trying to protect you from bad feelings, not hard work. To truly understand how to beat this, we need to transition into looking at the anatomy of this mental block. Let's examine your brain on procrastination. Imagine your brain has this highly overprotective bouncer, standing guard. When you're faced with a challenging or, an ambiguous task, it isn't your logical, planning, rational brain that takes the wheel. Instead, that protective bouncer, your emotional processing center, steps right up, decides the situation is a threat, and immediately locks the doors to your reasoning. It hits the brakes hard on your productivity, completely shutting down your ability to just logically execute the steps needed to get the job done. And what exactly is causing that bouncer to hit the panic button and lock the doors? Well, it boils down to 3 specific negative emotional triggers. First, there's uncertainty. You look at a messy project and think, am I even doing this right? Where do I even begin? Then comes fear. What if I fail? What if my boss hates it? What if it's just way too hard for me? And finally, inertia. This is that literal, heavy physical sensation of being super glued to your chair while your mind just helplessly races in circles. When you face that difficult task, your brain is immediately flooded with a potent cocktail of these 3 triggers. They hit us fast, creating an overwhelming wave of distress that makes doing nothing feel far safer than doing something. Here's what's actually happening in your head. It's called the amygdala hijacked. Those intense feelings of fear and uncertainty don't just float around harmlessly in your subconscious. They directly target and hijack your brain's amygdala. Now, that is the primitive part of your brain entirely responsible for processing severe, life-threatening danger. To your amygdala, that difficult work assignment or complex tax form isn't just a boring chore. It processes that blank document with the exact same blaring alarm bells as a saber-toothed tiger jumping out of the bushes. It triggers a literal fight, flight, or freeze response. In the case of procrastination, we freeze. It effectively paralyzes us, preventing us from starting anything at all. But here is the fantastic news, and I want you to really feel the relief here. You are not broken, you are not lazy, and most importantly, you are absolutely not at the mercy of this biological response. We can actively tame the amygdala. Now that we've accurately identified the emotional root of the problem, we can begin to dismantle this internal barrier. We possess precise, scientifically backed psychological tools to calm that overprotective bouncer, regain our focus, and take our power back from those negative emotional triggers. We can put the logical brain right back in the driver's seat. We start with a core concept called affective labeling. It sounds highly clinical, I know, but I promise you it's an incredibly practical, everyday tool. Affective labeling is simply the act of clearly naming your specific fear. Instead of letting a vague cloud of anxiety just swirl around in your head, you state it out loud. I am feeling uncertain about how to write this introduction, or I am afraid of failing this big presentation.
Here's why this works biologically. Speaking the fear out loud essentially forces the logic center of your brain, the prefrontal cortex, to wake up and process the emotion. By putting words to the feeling, you are literally taking the microphone away from the panicked amygdala. Once you've successfully labeled that fear and woken up your logical brain, you need a concrete, step-by-step psychological escape route to keep moving forward. Enter the 10-10-10 rule. This is a powerful, highly effective system recommended by our source material to systematically evaluate and diffuse your task anxiety. It's a mental framework designed specifically to instantly shift your perspective on whatever is holding you back. It completely pulls you out of the emotional weeds and gives you a clear, objective view of the actual stakes. The entire framework revolves around this one pivotal question: will this failure matter in? When fear and uncertainty start to heavily take over, and you feel that freezing paralysis setting in, our brain has a terrible habit of catastrophizing. It basically tricks us into thinking that failing at this one single task is going to dictate our entire future and totally ruin our lives. This specific question stops that spiral dead in its tracks. It forces you to pause, step way back, and critically evaluate the actual, tangible, real-world risk of the project you're about to do.
So let's put it to the test. Will this potential failure matter in 10 minutes? Will it matter in 10 months? How about in 10 years? Let's say you sit down and you write an absolutely terrible first draft of a quarterly report. In 10 minutes, yeah, you might feel a little embarrassed or frustrated with yourself. In 10 months, that draft was edited, published, and is now buried deep in some digital archive nobody even looks at. In 10 years, you probably won't even remember the specific job title you held when you wrote it, let alone the draft itself. When you look at your anxiety through this expansive lens, the long-term significance of a potential failure drastically shrinks down to its proper, tiny size. So the crucial point is this: once you've shrunk that fear down and dramatically shifted your perspective, immediate physical action is your absolute primary cure for stagnation. You have successfully cleared the emotional roadblock from your mind. Now you have to physically move your body forward. You completely do not need a grand, sweeping, multi-step plan to conquer the whole project. You just need to initiate forward motion right this very second to break the final lingering remnants of that inertia. I really want to leave you with this incredible takeaway direct from the source material. The best antidote to doing nothing is simply to do something. Any physical action, no matter how remarkably small or seemingly insignificant, completely dismantles the emotional block. Type one single word on the page. Open the digital folder and name it. Just put your physical hands on the keyboard and take a breath. Once you're in physical motion, the amygdala lets go entirely, realizing there's no actual danger, and that beautiful flow of actual productivity can finally begin. So my direct challenge to you today is this: what task are you going to tackle right now? Seriously, don't wait. Don't go reorganize the spice rack. You have the tools, you understand your brain's complex emotional architecture, and you know definitively that you are not just being lazy. It's time to break your cycle of inertia, apply these frameworks to calm the amygdala, and finally, just get started. Thanks for joining me on this explainer. Now go take that immediate physical action.